Welcome to Her Lights, your home for women's sports coverage. I'm your host, Erin Foley, a stand-up comic, TV writer, and most important, an obsessed sports fan. I break down the best games, highlight the best stories, and interview the best from the world of women's sports. So put on your jerseys, stretch out your hammies, and let's do this. Hello, Herlighters. It's Erin Foley back in the booth talking women's sports. So happy to be back with you. Oh my God, a lot is happening. Well, the world of women's sports is just obviously exploding. And in particular, right now, women's basketball is, it's my favorite time of the year. It's March Madness. It's pre-March Madness. It's peak March Madness, according to my guest today. I can't wait to get into this episode. Okay, so women's college basketball. This is one of my favorite sports to watch. I love it so much. And my guest today is Sabreena Merchant, and she is the women's basketball staff writer for The Athletic, which is owned by the New York Times. And I will talk about her in 2 seconds. But I want to tell you how this interview went. Now, normally, I'll sit down, obviously, with a guest, an athlete, a coach, or a writer, and, we'll do more of a deep dive about them and their life and how they got there. And I wrote down a couple of questions that I really wanted to get to know, Sabreena better. But we just hit the ground running, which is totally my fault, about nerdy college basketball. And I couldn't stop. My Herlighters, my sweet listeners. And I think it's just because I watched so much, and it's the last weekend, or 2 days ago, was the conference tournaments, right? Was the conference tournament finals. So we had the Big Ten and the Big 12 and the SEC, and there was so much action. And we have the selection Sunday for March Madness on Sunday coming up. So we went deep. What I'm saying is I didn't, unfortunately, learn a ton about Sabreena, but she's going to come back on and we're going to do more of a deep dive on her path as a writer. At the very end, I did ask her a question about about sports writing in general. So stay tuned at the very end for that. But we just had this awesome, very energetic, excited conversation about what we had just watched. Also, if you're filling out your brackets, we do bracket busters about halfway through the interview. So there'll be a lot of new information, hopefully, of teams to watch when you're filling out your brackets. She has some really good inside stories about, she reports on all these games. She's in the press room and she gets to meet the coaches and the players. So she has a lot of really fun insight. But just a warning, it gets pretty nerdy. And for me, it was a slice of heaven. If you don't follow Sabreena, she is a fantastic writer, and she also hosts a podcast with Ben Pickman, a couple of the other basketball writers for The Athletic. I will link to everything in the show notes. Been covering women's basketball for The Athletic for years now. She's written WNBA, NCAA, women's basketball. Before joining The Athletic, she covered, the Clippers, Lakers for SB Nation, alumni of Duke, which we'll start talking about immediately because Duke won over the weekend, and how she kind of watches her alumni play. And she wrote for the Chronicle, the big paper at Duke, when she went there. Anyway, she's an absolute delight, and it was just so fun and energizing to talk about what's happening, because this is the greatest, this past weekend and this week and next week and into March Madness is peak women's college basketball. And if you don't watch women's college basketball, you can still get a lot of fun talk from this episode. And then maybe it'll excite you to jump in, because this Sunday is when it's announced all the teams into the madness. You can just casually or nerdily fill out your brackets. And it's just so fun because the storylines are really incredible. So let's do it. Let's jump in with Sabreena from The Athletic. And I'm telling you, you're going to love her and you're going to learn a lot like I did. All right, let's hit it. The timing couldn't be better for me to have you on the podcast, selfishly, because what a weekend. I had some jaw-dropping moments. The whole season of college basketball. We'll do college basketball first. And then if we have time, we'll jump into the WNBA. But in my all things Sabreena deep dive, I realized
Mm.
you are an alum of Duke. And I was like, Sunday morning must have been. And I know you have to be impartial as a sports writer, but tell me how you watched the game on Sunday.
I will say that Duke women's basketball is probably the one sport that I have actually entered some sort of impartiality with. Every other Duke sport, whether that's soccer, lacrosse, men's basketball, I find myself as, enthusiastic as I was back when I was on campus. Women's basketball, I think I've done a decent job of stepping back and just trying to cover it like a professional, which doesn't mean I didn't, appreciate what they were doing in that game, but I'm not sure that it was like full Blue Devil fan happening as I was watching it.
Is that because you feel like you have to keep this impartiality? I think that's a word.
It's part of it. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I think just watching so much basketball, I I just find myself not only enjoying Duke, but so many other teams at the same time. So it's not that I also don't love my alma mater. It's that I get to spend so much time in this space that I have developed so many other favorites, like just
Yeah.
people that I enjoy being around, coaches that I enjoy being around. And uh, not to say that I like Duke less, but also just, I don't know. It isn't, I think, what you would expect for like a Duke alum turning on the TV at like 9 a.m.
Yeah.
in the morning on a Sunday and like, oh my God, what's happening here?
Yeah, I've kind of come full circle with Duke. Like, I just grew up all we had, of course, was the men's March Madness. I mean, we had the women like, I remember earliest memories of like, mid 90s. I grew up a crazy UConn fan, so like, Lobo in 95 and stuff. But yeah, wait,
That's about
91?
right. Yeah. Yeah.
No, 95. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Um,
Yeah.
and but the Duke, we just as a household, we have a big like Foley family household of sports. We couldn't stand Duke. And then
Of
I kind
course.
of
Yeah.
loved Duke with the later years. I actually loved that team. So and then, you know, I think it's full circle with Duke because I used to hate Kara Lawson because she was on Tennessee.
Tennessee, of course.
Just
Yeah.
Tennessee. And now I love her. And now I'm like, oh my God, now I'm rooting for Duke again. But I just did not see them beating Notre Dame and NC State back to back. Did that kind of blow your mind?
NC State in particular kind of blew my mind because I wasn't sure that they had like the offensive firepower to keep up with this particular Wolfpack team. You think about Notre Dame and they did such a good job. Duke did such a good job defensively in that game, and it was more played on their terms. I think their final score was in the 60s, but to put up 76 on NC State was like pretty impressive number. I do wonder like how much that Isaiah James little hip stinger that she took in the first half kind of played into that. But all due respect, Duke, Lucia Kanenwa, just absolute revelation. She's so much fun to watch. I love the interview that she gave on TV post game too. Just how emotional she was, but also like just very much in her power. Like this is what we came here to do, and I'm really excited that it happened. But also like this is what was supposed to happen. But yeah, I think I mean, that was just such a cool path for them, right? To get to play every single team that they had lost to during the regular season and just one by one, like like a mad woman, just like in the like checking off the list, right?
Yeah, just like an assassin,
Right.
just taking out the targets. I love
Exactly.
it. I think the tournament so fun because it gives teams like, well, obviously title bragging rights, but it's so interesting, like the mindset going into March Madness. Like if you have a good tournament, it really propels you. And I think, for Duke in particular in the ACC, I was just like, whoa, that. And then, Notre Dame, I feel like going in the opposite direction.
Right.
NC State, I feel like they did take the
Kind of
loss.
level. Yeah.
They're, yeah, I feel pretty level with
Yeah.
them. But that's what's just really fun about the tournament going into the mat. It's like, I always just call pre-madness into madness, which is like my favorite thing ever. Yeah, but I just pictured you like losing your mind, tearing up your apartment, even though we've never met. I was like, I wonder how nuts she gets.
Yeah, honestly, this is like my favorite week. I know that the first two rounds of the NCAA tournament get all of the love because of the upsets and whatnot, but I think teams who have a history with each other having to play one another in a single elimination just adds a little extra oomph to it. And especially in these smaller conferences with, literally the bid is on the line, right? Like you can't go to the tournament unless you win your conference tournament. This week of March is, I think it's actually my favorite out of all of them. I mean, there's pros and cons to all of them, but I just
Yeah.
I love this time of year. Like, forget pre-madness. This is like peak
Yeah.
madness.
We just went from pre-madness to peak madness. I love it. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing more exciting. Like even the smaller, conferences this week, it really is. It's like do or die. And you see like people playing out of their minds. And then I sort of, I tend to like, well, I mean, I watch so many sports. It's a problem, a good problem. So I don't know a lot of the smaller, conferences and the teams in them. So this week I just go, I'll watch like semis and finals, and I'll learn about players on the regular all year, and that's always like a fun surprise. And then I get too emotionally attached to
Yeah,
teams, and then it'll be like Bumbleweed State, and I'm like, they have to win because I watched like two games this week.
exactly. I love when you just become irrationally like latched onto somebody after literally one half of watching them play basketball. Like this is this is what happened to me yesterday watching James Madison versus Arkansas State, and I'm watching this player named Chrislyn Rose on Arkansas State, who apologies to the Sun Belt Conference. I had not watched them during the regular season, but like Chrislyn Rose now, like I'm all in. Like put
Yeah.
her on a 16 seed on a one, and that's the player I'm keeping an eye out for.
Yeah, that's the ultimate joy. Like when you discover a team or a player, and then yeah, I'm like they have to win or my day is over. I love that. I love that type of fandom. I mean,
Yeah.
I do that. I think I do that a lot in other sports, but especially in like a tournament type. And also now I feel like because, I live in LA now, I grew up like just Big East basketball,
Mhm.
men's and women's, when women were televised, which was so nice of them that we could still play and play full court and in pants. But it's come a long way. But then I've been out in LA like almost, yeah, like 18 years now. So I've just kind of adopted like Pac-12. And then to see that blow up was just absolutely devastating. I'm
Mm.
still so angry. Um, but now I've gotten to know Big Ten because I know, you watch it here and there.
Exactly.
Um, and now I'm like, the Big Ten, I wanted to talk to you about that. And even we can do Big 12 too. I feel like they've just got to be so angry that UCLA and USC are now in it's like, it should be who's going to win, the Michigan State, the Iowa, the Indiana, like, and now it's like, oh, can they get out of the semis? Can they get out of the quarters? It's kind of a buzzkill.
Yeah, there's a certain flavor to the Big Ten, like even though it doesn't have the region in its name like the SEC or the Pac-12, you understand it to be the Midwest Conference, and they've sort of gone away from that in recent years, even before the West Coast editions with like Maryland and Rutgers, and now it's stretching to East Coast time, which is like not quite what the spirit of the Big Ten was, but I'm totally with you. Like I mean I've spent the whole year listening to coaches like bitch about how they had to come out to LA not just to play UCLA but also USC, and could there be a harder road trip in the country? Like probably not. You gotta.
Yeah.
The only good thing is that coming from the Midwest, you get to stay in LA for 3 days during January, which
Yeah.
has to be a blessing. But yeah, I think just not only the extra travel that has been, added to their schedules, but the fact that that trip is just such a nightmare in terms of having to play both of those teams. And then they just took all of the awards for your conference, right? Big Ten regular season champion, tournament champion, player of the year, defensive player of the year, sixth player of the year, coach of the year, like everything from USC and UCLA.
Oh God, it's so demoralizing. Do you see that ever changing? I mean, now there's 85 teams in the Big Ten.
Right.
Like, is this it? Is this what we're kind of stuck with?
I mean, I think there's always cycles with teams, I say that, and yet, like, UConn still runs the Big East, and Notre
Yeah.
Dame is still like winning a share of the ACC regular season title. But, like Tennessee, like had its peak, and now it's sort of been eclipsed by South Carolina, and who knows what happens, like if and when Dawn Staley decides to take on another role in her life. The Big Ten had like its Maryland peak, and then the Iowa years with Caitlin, and now we have the LA schools sort of having their moment. I think a lot of it is just there's there's so much more money in college basketball that a lot of these programs have the opportunity to build something up from scratch if they want to. And maybe that won't lead to sustained epic powerhouses like UConn, but I do think it means that we'll have more just like peaks for individual schools, which should make it more fun. As much as I, an LA resident, enjoy the greatness of USC and UCLA, I can understand why it's not like, the most enjoyable thing for the diehard Midwest Big Ten fans.
Yeah, I kind of fell in love with some of the, well, really the Indiana squad years ago because it was like my favorite comedy, one of my favorite comedy clubs. I like just base everything on like where I like to perform and then how many games I can watch. Like I'll get booked for a comedy club. I'm like, what women's sports are around me, and I just like drive to them.
That feels like a
Um,
great way of planning your trips.
Oh, it's just an absolute dream. Anyway, I found this comedy club, Comedy Attic in Bloomington, which I'm obsessed with. And so I got to see Indiana and meet at like go on the court. Like it was just like this was pre-COVID. Um, and so that's how I sort of fell in love with like Big Ten. And then of course the Iowa years, of course,
Right.
everybody, um, kind of discovered a lot of basketball just in general through that, which I'm like, great, whatever it takes. But also just don't have an opinion. Um, just fresh off watching 2 months of
Yeah.
best of women's basketball.
It's like I can say anything I want about Chrislyn Rose and Arkansas State now, but you
Yes.
stay away.
Yeah, I know. It's just it's the all right. So let's jump into UCLA, USC. I just adopted UCLA when I got here. And the reason why I adopted is because I'm a crazy softball fan and I was been obsessed with Lisa
Mm.
Fernandez for so long and she's the assistant coach. So I went to see a UCLA softball game and she was like right there. Like and no and like I think people in the stands sort of knew who she was, but like I'm older, so I was just like, oh. So anyway, that's how I adopted UCLA. Um, and then just been following them and uh, but it's I'm like always torn. I'm not torn at the end of the day who I want to win UCLA or USC, but Juju, you
Yeah.
can't take your eyes off her. Like, give me your thoughts on on the bun on all of it. I love her.
The bun is delightful. I really enjoyed when USC, won the Big Ten regular season title at UCLA. They come to their press conference afterwards. Lindsey Gottlieb's got the hat on. Kiki Iriafen has the hat and the shirt on. Juju's just still like jersey. Somebody asks her like, "Oh, you're not wearing any, Big Ten championship gear." She's like, "Well, I can't really wear hats, so like that's part of it." It's like, oh,
Oh
right,
my God,
right.
that's awesome.
That's important. But no, the bun is great. Love to have an iconic look that like, little kids can copy. Obviously, we had the national commercial with like Joel Embiid and a bunch of other people trying to get the Juju hair last year, which I thought was a great thing. So, everybody loves like some little bit of iconography to associate. And I think it's so great that she has like a bun that like isn't just something that girls can wear. It's something that everybody could theoretically wear. Like man bun's definitely a thing. So I love that. I just love how much she cares about playing in LA too. Like obviously she brings it all the time. You're not going to watch her against UConn and think like, oh, Juju doesn't care about this game because it's against UConn. Like every game matters to her, but the UCLA games really, really
Oh,
matter to her.
yeah.
And, I think she scored 30 points in every single game other than the first one that she played against UCLA. So now that's, 5 out of the 6. You think about the game that she had at Galen Center with like the 8 blocks and 4 of them coming in the fourth quarter, just like stupid, insane performance. She's just magnetic, right? Like the things that she can do on a basketball court, like she runs the floor so well. She's everywhere on defense. She sees Ingles stay to the basket that like I'm not sure where they came from,
I
and
know.
then like just has like a sense of the moment, right? Like how many times do you watch a game and like somebody makes a little run and it's just Juju pull up jumper, like kill shot here,
Yep.
over and over and over again. So I mean I love her. She's so funny. She's just like this regular 19-year-old kid who like still likes talking about the cartoons that she watches, like it's very very wholesome. Like I love the JuJu Watkins experience. And again, just as somebody who grew up in LA, I love that she wanted to rebuild this program, right? Like USC has historical success that was well before JuJu
Yeah.
Watkins was born, but it means something to her to play here, to play in front of her family, to dominate this rivalry in a way that few others have. So I'm all for it. I'm really glad that she has just brought like a level of excitement to women's basketball in LA that has been lacking for a little while.
Oh, absolutely. I find, I'm definitely like, okay, I'm absolutely cheering for UCLA. And then every time I watch USC for the last couple of years, it's impossible. First of all, I love Lisa Gottlieb. I'm a huge fan of hers. I love how she talks about her team. I love her coaching. I love
Mhm.
all of it. And it's so, it makes me annoyed how much I like USC. Like I like Kiki Arif. Like I love her play. It's been a little bit inconsistent, but I feel like she's like, I don't know, finding more and more the last couple weeks of the
Mhm.
season, which is not great for UCLA
It's
fans.
great timing
And
for USC though.
great timing. Yeah, and then I just find Juju just mesmerizing. And then the story of like the whole, yes, the LA piece. I mean, you don't really know it until you live here how wonderful a city of this is, but how hard of a city this is to live in for 8,000 different reasons. So for her to be born and raised here, absolutely what you said, and her to commit and put that team like basically on her back as a freshman. When I was watching that USC Notre Dame game earlier in the year, um, I was cheering for USC, and I thought, my God, the Snoop Dogg wearing a Juju outfit, the Cheryl, like all the stars and the celebrities, and then they get spanked by Notre Dame. I just felt like this is so much for the team, but also for her. I just felt like very protective of her. And I was like, this is a lot to ask,
Mhm.
a lot to ask a sophomore who's basically carrying at least part of the city of Los Angeles, except for like Westwood,
Right.
on her back, that to me was a moment where I was like, that we're asking we're asking a lot of her.
Yeah, I mean, especially coming at a time when the Sparks have been in a bit of a downturn, so it's not like
Yeah.
there's a WNBA team for everybody to really rally around. It's Juju and it's UCLA, and
Yeah.
I don't assign one person. Obviously, Lauren Betts is the best player in UCLA. I just don't think that she commands the
Yeah.
LA like fan base in a way that Juju does. But yeah, it's delightful. Like she's just she
She's
does
just
it so
so
well. Yeah,
fun.
yeah.
Yeah. I really like, I'm trying to think of like this, 30 years of watching, 30 plus years of watching women play basketball. She is, to me, if she stays healthy, she's player of the year next 3 years. Like I just don't see anyone, earlier in the season, I was so adamant how Lauren Betts was not getting enough credit because
Mhm.
I'd always used to say like she I'm like, okay, when I'm thinking of like best player, I'm thinking about like how does the game, how do people's have to like their game plan has to completely change when they're playing this person. And I felt like Lauren Betts on either side of the ball was completely disruptive. She was dumping in, 25, 30, and then you can't go in the middle when she's there. She's 7'10".
Absolutely.
And so I was like, well, she's doing it on the both sides. And then the more I'm watching Juju, I was like, well, she's actually doing it on both sides.
Yeah,
Like the
yeah.
blocks to me,
Just a
that game
different way.
against I
Yeah.
literally I literally was like, okay, okay, it's Juju. It's Juju for me. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I I I took back Lauren. I have Lauren like two. It's also very hard to compare like guards to centers and
Yeah, they just
stuff.
occupy such different spaces on the court and different roles on their teams. I mean, obviously they're both focal points, just in an entirely different way, right? Like
Yeah.
where Lauren gets the ball, where Juju gets the ball, where they stand on the court, like even just emotionally the roles they seem to have on their
Yeah.
teams, right? Like Juju has like a couple of seniors who help with like that leadership component, even if they are transfers with like I think Grant Marshall aids a lot in that. And Lauren is like gets loud when I feel like she needs to get loud,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just tries to add a little bit to the intensity that UCLA can sometimes like go through the motions. But yeah, I think it's just so fun that like there's two different kinds of players who are both tremendously successful, but leading their teams in entirely different ways. And like that we get to have this conversation and it's not like, demeaning on one or the other. It's just they're both awesome. They both have had excellent moments over the course of the season. Like you think about what Betts was able to do against South Carolina or Juju against UConn, and then both of them having their rivalry moments, whether that was in the regular season or in the tournament. I mean, I realize like other people should be part of this conversation when we talk about player of the year, like there's Hannah Hidalgo and Paige Beckers and like everybody around the country. But to me, it's like, it's so funny that after all of this time, like everybody in college basketball is focused on LA when we were just this afterthought for so
Yeah.
long. Yeah.
Yeah, now we're dominating the Big
Yeah.
Ten. Yeah, no, I mean it's just interesting. Yeah, because I mean I grew up like, and I'm still like a crazy UConn. UConn will always be my team, but it's also been out here for so long. Like I've adopted the Sparks as Liberty's my number one, but I've adopted the Sparks. Like I get
Mhm.
real protective of teams. Um, I have to ask you one nerdy question. So
Okay.
listeners, this might be very nerdy, but I want to ask a pro. And then we'll stop talking about UCLA, USC. But the UCLA has been an absolute like emotional roller coaster for me as a fan.
Mhm.
And I feel like, and I could be completely wrong because I love Corey Close. I think she's such a fantastic coach, and there's no one better to watch on the sidelines as just she looks like she's going to have a heart attack slash nervous breakdown slash I don't know pool party. There's so much going on with her, and I'm obsessed with her. Um, I just wonder, um, they seem to like have moments where they're like a completely different team, kind of game from game and then within games. And I'm not, I guess what I'm trying to say because I want to be 100% supportive and I'm not a women's basketball coach is the rotating of players is
Oh yeah.
so it is like every 30 seconds you're like Douglas is out. Okay, Barker's in. I'm a little bit worried. I'm a little bit
Yeah.
worried
Yeah.
that
That is
nobody has this almost time enough to develop like I've got this. This is my game. I'm
mhm.
going to go in. I know I have X amount of time. If my shot doesn't work, I got to keep shooting. But they're already then Gardner's in, and I'm like, I don't love it. Sabreena, help me out.
Okay, so I will say that the main complaint I hear from people who are watching UCLA for the first time is just, oh my God, where are the subs happening from, right? Like you miss one shot and like, Corey is signaling at somebody to come in or a bad turnover, like literally one mistake and you don't get a chance to play through and develop your rhythm unless you're like Lauren Betts or Kiki Rice.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's hard to argue with the results of this season,
Yes.
right? Like when you
Yes.
have the depth that UCLA does, when you have an Alina Arnisalo who can run the point if Kiki's not doing her job, or Tamia Gardner or Janiyah Barker who can come in and be those forward or post up threats if like Dugalich or Hawkeyes is struggling. Like I get that there are all of these options. To me, it would be very stressful to play in that kind of system. And also just like the lineups are constantly changing. Who are we guarding? Maybe it's stressful for the opposing team to constantly have to focus on like, okay, I got 13, like I got this person. And maybe that's part of the magic is that you're inflicting as much, anxiety on the other team as you are on your own. Yeah, I wish I had a good explanation for this. Unfortunately, I think it's just, you know, a method of trying to hold everybody accountable, right? Like,
Yeah.
know that something is always hanging over your head, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you do not perform, I have another option. And, I can't say that a lot of other coaches play this way. Like, there's obviously teams that run a deep rotation, but it's more so like, this is our second unit. We'll bring in four players now, or like what Tennessee does, which is like the 2.5 minutes everybody's coming in and out. But it is definitely a unique UCLA Corey Close thing. And admittedly, like it's not like she's won, a national championship or even a Final Four, to which I can say like it's completely unimpeachable. It stresses me out. So you're
Yeah.
not alone in
Okay,
watching
good.
this and thinking like, what is going on? It stresses me out. Uh, I think she's kind of toned it down over the last couple weeks. Like I didn't notice it to the same extent during the Big Ten tournament. Could just be anecdotal, but uh,
Yeah, I mean, she
it's
tends,
weird.
I think, yeah, when the game is like on the line, I think, probably four out of the five are fairly consistent
Yeah.
in the last couple minutes. But yeah, that was my only thing. I guess when I'm like, basically talking to myself about the subject, I go, is this, you know, I don't know, long term, I think like when you get in the tournament and you're playing these best of the best and you're getting down to the last minute or two of like who's going to take the shot? You know what I mean? Who is that person that's like I want the ball? Um I don't know. I worry I feel like you can make a very good argument for UCLA to win the whole thing and then 2 seconds later, I'd be like, I don't see it.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I guess I could say that about almost literally every single team, because it's been so crazy. And we can jump into South Carolina, Texas. That beat down. I did not see that coming. Although the Texas LSU game was like literally one of the ugliest basketball games I think I've ever seen. So I was like, I was saying like if LSU could, if they don't lose Johnson and Morrow and they could shoot like some of their
Yeah,
shots went in, they could have legitimately beat Texas
exactly.
on
Yeah.
Saturday.
Yeah, I don't usually like to think about college basketball from a ratings perspective, but I have to imagine that Texas advancing deep is not good for the bottom line just based on what slugfests these games end up being. Like when you talk about Texas LSU, it's not even just the SEC tournament game, it's also the one they played in Texas earlier this season that was just, I think it ended up in the 50s with both teams and just really like knocked down, not a lot of shots going in, really a lot of physicality and not, I
It's
think
not
like
pretty.
I think
It's
a
not
modern
pretty.
basketball fan likes to see a little bit more pace, a little bit more shot making, Not that everything needs to be like an up and down offensive, exhibition, but there's a balance that has to be struck. And I don't think Texas really lands on like the middle of that balance. And then the South Carolina game, like my goodness, I don't even know what got into Rory and Madison Booker and just like let alone the shots, but like the decision making there. I Let's just say I'm very excited for Texas to stop playing SEC teams and just be
Yeah.
emboldened to like all of their worst tendencies because
Yes.
like other teams will force them to open it up a little bit. And like, Texas played Notre Dame earlier this year. I thought that was a very enjoyable game to
Yeah.
watch and like still like allowed for their style of play, just not to the extent that we saw against LSU and South Carolina. But, you know, in terms of playing favorites, I think it's clear that the Longhorns are not my ideal watch, but uh, I wouldn't like read too much into what it looks like to lose to South Carolina in what was essentially a South Carolina home game, right? Like that's the
Yeah.
beauty of once we get out of the first weekend of the tournament, all neutral courts, like everybody's got to show up and Birmingham and Spokane should be a little bit more
Yeah.
unbiased than Greenville,
Unbiased.
South Carolina.
Absolutely. And absolutely. And I just have to ask you this because I did not know the coin flip existed. And I was irate. And I just thought, has that been, is that like what happens? I'm like, how about add up all the points and
Yeah.
who won, who had the most points, who had the most rebounds? Like a coin flip to me was wild.
So in defense of the coin flip, uh,
That's what we're going to call this episode
both
in
both
defense of the coin
teams
flip.
both teams did get to win a share of the SEC title.
Yeah,
So it's not as though like a championship was decided by a coin flip.
true.
It was just seeding. And the SEC is a very deep conference. It's not like I think South Carolina had an easier path necessarily than Texas because they were the 1 seed versus the 2 seed. You could argue that LSU without Flau'jae Johnson is a more desirable matchup than, South Carolina having to face Oklahoma or Kentucky in the second, the semifinal round. So the stakes of the coin flip, I think, were unnecessarily heightened when it really was like it's like not a huge deal. Like
I made it a huge deal.
seeding in a tournament when South Carolina is already basically the home team, you know,
True.
not
Yeah.
affecting too much. I did love that on the broadcast, you've got like Carolyn Peck talking about, well, the 1 seed is super important because with daylight savings, you only have 23 hours before the next day and like you need as much sleep as possible and they play in the morning. It's like we're going in too deep. Like the propaganda for the coin flip is too deep. The level of pageantry associated with it really made me just appreciate the whole endeavor. Like they mint a custom coin for the event, right? Like with the Gamecocks logo on one side, Texas on the other, and they had all of this like they had like a full-on photo shoot with the coin, right? Like every time you go to a commercial, there's like this bumper of like the Longhorns coin with like blue confetti around it, and then like the Gamecocks side of the coin with like other imagery around it. And you had the commissioner of the SEC like in a room, presumably by himself for 2 hours, just like flipping the coin over and over again, making sure that it's like weighted correctly and that he can do it on one shot to the point where when he actually does the official coin flip, his hand is shaking like as he's just demonstrating the coin. Like I loved all of it. It was so stupid. They had a countdown clock on SEC Network like before the games even started that day for a coin flip that may or may not happen at that point, because we didn't even know if the results would lend itself to a necessary coin flip. But yeah, I mean, college sports, like I think that's kind of what differentiates them from professionals is that like we can have this ridiculous nonsense, like just like you would never get something this stupid. To be clear, it was very stupid
So
in a
stupid.
professional sport, but I love it. It's so ridiculous and so over the top, and everybody just fully committed to this bit, and like that it was going to be really important for the fate of South Carolina and Texas, and I loved it. Loved.
Yeah, it was the most dramatic lead up to, as you were saying, like something that, and, you know,
Yeah,
I just was like, if I was Texas and I lost, yeah, on a coin flip, I guess it's also because South Carolina is just
yeah.
like the advantage is so huge when they're home.
I
And
will say the only drawback is that we were talking a lot more about the coin flip
yeah,
than the fact that Texas, first year in the SEC, splits the SEC title with South Carolina. Nobody
that's
has
huge.
managed to split an SEC title with South Carolina in like a decade.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I think that is probably the main, you know, again, drawback is that it was it was so
so
silly
dramatic.
that it just dominated the conversation in a way that probably didn't need to.
Yeah. All right, two questions. Players stock rising and falling, like, players eligible to go into the WNBA next year. Anybody that you think is doing themselves justice and anybody tanking?
I think the NC State guards are doing themselves a lot of favors right now. They've been playing really well for the last couple months. Isaiah James kind of had this coming out party during last year's tournament, but if she can do that again, really has a chance to like make herself a first round pick and potentially even like, a single digit pick in the WNBA draft this year. So they're the first ones that come to mind to me as like players who, yeah, they have like certain flaws, but they consistently show up in big games, and that's I think matters a lot to WNBA talent evaluators. The Yukon crew, AZ Fudd and Paige Becker is like Paige admittedly does not have a lot to raise her stock, but
Yeah.
if there are ever any doubts about Paige, there are really not any. There shouldn't be. But AZ, I think, being able to play out such a healthy season and having good performances in the Big East tournament just provides more confidence to people who are a little concerned about like just the medicals with her, considering how up and down her college career has been in terms of her availability. Um, in
Do you
terms
think
of,
she's going to go?
I think if they win, she'll go.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any reason to stay if she's won a national title.
Yeah. That's true.
And like the whole point was she and Paige wanted to play together. And
So
this was like
adorable.
their year that they got to play together. And Paige is leaving. So does AZ really need to stay? It's an open-ended
Yeah.
question. If I were her, I would go just
Do you
because,
think? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I, anytime that So I'm kind of mixed on it because on the one hand, like the WNBA financial landscape could change dramatically in 2026 and it might help you out to like start on a higher level rookie contract. But also somebody like AZ who has dealt with just this volume of injuries, I kind of want to just capitalize on being
Yeah.
healthy at this moment and like let's get my pro career started off on the right foot. And then like again, being able to go out with Paige, I think is just it's a nice story for both of them. So
Yeah, absolutely. And then you also, which we can jump into a second, but when you're looking at the WNBA draft, it just seems like it's guard after guard after guard after guard, and I think she can get herself in top, I would say first round, don't you think?
yeah,
If she,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, even if it's later in the first round. So yeah, I think that's really smart. Yeah. Okay. Sorry not to cut you off. Keep going.
No, no, you're good. As far as stock down, um, I think Georgia Amore is the kind of player where uh, WNBA people really like her because like she's just so affable and like looks like teammates love her and she runs a really good offense in college, but there is this forever question of like, can she succeed against WNBA level athletes on a day-to-day basis? And everybody's just trying to like latch on to like, well, she did it in this game or she did it in this game, and there are just fewer and fewer opportunities for her to prove that. And it hasn't happened as frequently as you would hope. So I think even though like there is real value in getting a WNBA backup point guard, which I think is like the low key, like less, the least depth of any position in the
Yeah.
WNBA, I do think that like her upside is kind of diminishing like the further we get into this tournament without her having a breakout type performance.
But the
Um,
accent.
yes,
She's so charming. And her numbers
incredibly.
legit are nuts,
Yeah,
you know?
the
But it is.
assists,
It's
yeah.
like, what is she? She's small. Is she like
No,
five
she's like
four,
5'5", I think.
five
Yeah.
five? You know, like that is tough. But yeah, that's gonna be one of these things where I feel like as the league gets bigger and bigger, like for me, it can't expand fast enough. I'm like, figure it out.
Yeah.
I want 7 new teams tomorrow so we can see like the Georgia Amores and people that have been, I think back to like Monica Cesano, and I think about all these players that just couldn't cut that limited number of spots. So I'm like, keep going.
Yeah, and then I
Expansion teams, yeah.
think just like one more, I would say Tahina Pow's stock is probably, if not like rising, then at least settling. She is another one of those just big game players. Like South Carolina needs a big bucket, against Kentucky in the regular season finale. There's Tahina Pow, like executing defensively pretty well. Maybe like one of the best shooting prospects that we've seen in the last 5 years for the WNBA draft. And like on the other side of the coin, her teammates, Raven Johnson and Bree Hall, I would say kind of stock dropping. Like the more Tessa Johnson succeeds, the more Mylasia Fulwiley succeeds. And it's like, why are those two starting? Like, is it really
Yeah.
them who are driving South Carolina's success? So I think, yeah, just, some mixed results out of the Gamecocks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when you have Full Wiley coming off the bench, you're like, Jesus Christ.
Embarrassment of riches.
That's
Yeah.
so she comes over and she's just yeah, to me, her and Juju are the players where I remember that clip that was floating around pre South Carolina, not this season, last season. I was like, who is that person? And she's like 12. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't even with you. Just give me a couple potential bucket or bracket busters.
Yeah. So, like, admittedly, a little bit harder to do without looking at the bracket
I
itself.
know. Just
But
some teams
yeah,
that like maybe we can keep our eye on that we don't know that like could do
sure.
some
Yeah.
damage.
Well, Tennessee, everybody has their eye on, and I think will fare a lot better in the NCAA tournament than they have of late in the conference schedule, just because their style is so unique and playing it for the first time is a real adjustment period for a lot of teams. So, especially on the second day of the weekend where, you only have a day and a half to scout and your players are just like seeing this in live action for the first time, I really think they could surprise some people, provided they get to like a second round or, and don't get upset earlier. But that's
I
one
mean, they
thing to keep
came
an eye on.
so close. Like 55 of their games, I'm making
Right.
up numbers. They literally lost by 1 point.
Yeah.
And then she has a baby. I mean, the whole story is just I find myself reluctantly cheering for my
Right.
MMA because it's so feel good.
Yeah. I mean, to take that job after being a D2 coach and then like have this big life change in addition to that coming on top of it and then deciding to get back and coach within like 10 days of having the baby, it's all too much. I hope she has a very nice, long, deserved maternity leave,
Yes.
in 3 weeks or whenever that happens. Um, let's see. I think California is a team I'd keep an eye on. Just shoots a lot of threes, and you think about teams that can spring upsets in the tournament. It's ones that uh, just have a high variance, and Cal is one of those teams to me. And again, one that I don't think is very heavily scouted. They're kind of like the afterthoughts of the ACC because they just joined and they hadn't been very good in the Pac-12 of late, but really nice season this year. Like very veteran players, some of them who've had tournament experience at other schools. So that's one I'd keep an eye on. And then I love Oklahoma State out of the Big 12. Staley Hurd, just truly one of my favorite players to watch in the country. Just nerves of steel. Like every time there's a big shot that you want taken, like Staley Hurd is the player that I want with the ball in her hands. Plays with glasses, which I think is just a really underrated like quirk, right? Like who has the gall to like just not wear goggles, like just straight up glasses. I think it's choice, but it tells me a lot about her personality. Um, I like that team a lot. Another team that actually went through their coach delivering and a baby during the regular season and coming back immediately and all of the ups and downs that season has entailed. I think the Cowgirls are a very cool story there too.
I love it. I love the glasses. I didn't watch him play a lot, but when I started playing I basketball when I was really young, I had to get glasses and my dad took me to get glasses and we came home and I looked like an accountant and I was like, like 8 and my mom was like, "These aren't glasses you play sport." sports, and they were like wired men's like accounting
Oh my
glasses.
God.
And then I had to play with goggles, which really, as a, when you're 12 or 13 or 14, it really hits home with self-esteem issues. But I feel like they were at least an upgrade for me, either being an accountant or they used to call me Kurt Rambis, which was
Ah,
really,
yeah.
really it does
It's
well. I'm
rude.
like,
Yeah.
why didn't I have a lot of confidence? 'Cause a teenage girl should not be called Kurt Rambis.
No, no, that's
Um,
that's really rude. I apologize.
yeah.
Just
And I hate the Lakers. So
I
I was
know I was
like,
gonna say your Northeast roots and then having to
oh, brutal,
be called
Sabrina.
Kurt Rampus.
Brutal. I was like, it hurts on so many
Oh man.
levels, but I'm over it. And one day I'll meet him and I'll be like, a little. Okay. I find it absolutely impossible to pick because when I'm picking my final four, I just go to the four number ones.
Yeah.
Like I keep going back and I go, then I force myself and I go three, one doesn't, because I know there's going to be upsets. Like
hmm
the parity is too much. On any given day, it feels like any team literally can beat any team. And so this is an absolute just downright annoying question to ask because I'm annoyed when I'm filling out like a final four. Um but when I'm just looking at second tier, like twos or threes that could possibly get there, I still feel like the two teams I just keep coming back to that are locks for me are South Carolina and UCLA. And I know that's like fairly easy, but South Carolina was not that even 2 weeks ago I was like,
hmm
but I don't know. I just feel like I cannot not pick them because it's Dawn Staley and look what they did to Texas. And until someone beats them, I
Right.
have to put them in. The other two just put in any team, really. I
Yeah.
have no, I really don't. You know what I mean?
What's funny is, I have some friends who always ask me like, oh, as of March 10th, who would you pick to win the national title? And for weeks it was Notre Dame, Notre Dame, Notre Dame. And then when I was asked yesterday, literally March 10th, it was, I kind of think it's UConn. And that is not to pander to, the host here, but I think, Paige Beckers just doesn't miss the Final Four. UConn doesn't miss the Final Four when like they have a modicum of health as opposed to the one year when they didn't. But I think like you look at all of these teams and like I know what UCLA is going to look like in the tournament. I know what USC is going to look like in the tournament. And I look at UConn and they're playing Sarah Strong and Paige Becker is less than 30 minutes a game. And to think if you just bump that up to 35,
Yeah.
like they're already boasting a scoring margin of about 29 points per game. And if you can add their two best players onto the court for an additional 10 minutes, I think the upside is there in a way that just doesn't exist for some of the other teams. Like how much more can Juju really do? Like I don't want to test it. Like obviously I'm not like saying that JuJu Watkins is not capable of very great things, but they're already asking so much of her on a regular basis. They're already asking so much of Lauren Betts on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And I think of all of the teams, the Huskies just have this extra gear that they don't always have to tap into that is available for them in the tournament.
Yeah. I think they're just too close to my heart to like I get I like what I mean? I'm like, I want to slot them in. And then I go, is it just me being a huge UConn fan? But then I also think their conference is so crappy in a
hmm
way. So like every team has been battle tested with these power conferences.
Right.
But then I think, well,
They
that's
did
actually
just beat
maybe a
South
good thing.
Carolina too,
Yeah, they beat South Carolina. And then I'm like, well, they're still fresh. And Dawn Staley just yelling how she didn't get Sarah Strong 'cause she blamed Sarah Strong's mother. That made me laugh.
So it's a great point. I'm glad she brought it
Yeah.
up.
Oh my God. She's like, how did I miss out on her? I'm like, oh my God. So
And like a
right now
kid
you
from the
have,
South too,
I know. I just it's that UConn sort of,
Mhm.
magic. Yeah. I mean, the dream I said going into the season is for me, the Aaron Philly dream sequence is UCLA plays UConn. So it's an absolute win-win. Will I get that? And then of course I'll be torn. I'll just be like rooting for everybody that has the ball, like whoever has the
Right.
ball, like you know what I
Just
mean?
keep scoring.
Yeah, because it's like UConn, of course, I'm going to ride or die UConn, but UCLA's never won and UConn's won 800. Well,
Mhm.
UCLA won, but pre NCAA.
Right.
Like, so, and then Corey Close, I just want to see her reaction if she won, like if her head still stays on. There's so many
I hope she
factors.
doesn't bust out the leather pants again. The quarter zip on the leather pants was a weird look in the
It
regular
was.
season finale.
Yeah. The leather. the leather pants. I like her in like a just like, like the harried look, like coming at like a mom coming out of a gym. You know what I mean? Like running to get her kids. I think that's like
I
the
miss when coaches used to dress up all the time. Like I
yeah.
think the athleisure is not the greatest look, but I don't think you can like halfway it. Like if you're
No.
gonna go leather pants, you got to go like full Adia Barnes, like leather
Yes.
all the way down, you know?
Yeah, I feel like she's the halfway. That's such a good point. It really you got to go in it or harried mom or like
Yeah,
Dawn Staley adjacent. You know what I
exactly.
mean?
Yeah.
Because she's just she's it. Okay, three or one, two, whatever you want to talk
Yeah.
about. Any storylines, WNBA because it's obviously right around the corner. Anything you're super pumped about?
I'm just fascinated to see what the aces look like. They've always operated with this like nobody believes in us mentality, which I've found very strange considering how
I'm
much
like, okay, you're an
talent.
all-star team.
Yeah, it's like simultaneously where they say, we're the aces, we get every team's best shot, but also like nobody believed in us. No, we cannot have both. But I do think that we're finally at a point where, they didn't make the finals last year. And Aisha Wilson's like kind of been out of mind where everybody else is an unrivaled and Nafisa Collier has like ascended as is she the next big thing in the WNBA. So and they don't have Kelsey Plum anymore. They don't have a lot of their role players who have been big parts of their championship runs. So I think just new look aces. What does that look like? Can they recapture what made them so special, like even 2 years ago, is like probably number one on my list this season.
Yeah, that's I have a couple of, well, I mean, just being out, I know this is LA specific because we're both out here. I'm just like so craving a big Sparks fan base. I think we have got such a good fan base and
Mhm.
we've just been led astray for quite a long time. And I had Lynn Roberts on a couple months ago and she's so great. She's just
The
funny and
best. Yeah.
coolest. And I just was like, can we please be friends? Um, I just loved her. And she turned Utah around and that style of play. And I'm hoping we get Pow Pow. I just like, so I'm really excited, not only for the spark, but really the fan base. I feel like the fan base is just like, it can get crazy. And when it's not crypto and when Stables gets rocking, I really want that for
Mhm.
Los Angeles. Another, of course, I just cannot, Steph White as a gay woman, I just get real close to the TV when she appears on the television, and I want to
Speaking of somebody
see.
who knows how to rock leather, Steph
Yes,
White, number one
yes,
on the list.
Sabrina, you can see where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
She's pretty dreamy, and I'm very interested to see that team. Gel, not gel. What's going to happen with that? That's going to be. And then I'd real quick, I want to get your thoughts on is there a team like I just kind of was looking at teams like I don't know like you're the pro here, but it doesn't seem like there's an NBA season that we've gone into in a long time where I was like they play for what team? Like
Yeah.
there's so much I was looking at the Washington Mystics because like I was thinking about players in Unrivaled that have been so great and I'm
Mhm.
like, "Oh, they're going to Leah Edwards and Shakira Austin. And so I looked at the rest of the roster and I was like, okay, they don't have that's
Yeah.
it. They
Yeah.
just have those
That's
two.
about
I
it.
was like, okay, well, I guess they're gonna be passing to each other. And then I was like, oh, they have the the whatever, third and fourth pick, and does that get Elena Della Dunn? I don't know, like they're like could be an absolute hot mess, but also like super interesting. There's so many
Mhm.
teams like that. You're like, what is that team gonna be like?
Yeah, the what is that team going to be like award I think really has to go to Phoenix, who has one player from their roster last year, like one starter, I should say, from their roster last year in Kalia Copper. And, they brought in Alyssa Thomas, they brought in Satu Sabali, basically hemorrhaged their entire roster to get those two players. Diana Taurasi retires, Brittany Griner goes to Atlanta, and I'm gonna be watching that team thinking like are they just wearing orange jerseys because it's like a WNBA All-Star team, or like is it actually Phoenix? I think the dissonance for me is going to really hit when the Mercury hit the court because I mean it's been 20 years of Diana, right? And then 10 plus years of Brittany Griner, and to not have either of them, plus like again, none of the players who have even been there for the last like 3 years.
Yeah.
That to me is like I look at that roster and think I don't know what's happening here. Like I really like these three players, but basketball kind of requires five, probably more. So what's happening here?
They're going to be like, we're going to do the unrivaled. We're
Yeah.
doing the unrivaled version. We're only put three out at a time. I'm like, okay. Yeah, it's going to be. I try to explain it to a lot of like new and WNBA fans, and it's almost impossible. You know what I mean? I'm just like, buckle up, pick a
Yeah, like
team, don't pick a team, pick a player. Like it's going to be, I don't know, for me, one of the most, I mean, exciting. I always get thrilled when the WNBA season starts, but interesting, I would say, is the
yeah,
word,
absolutely.
in a really cool way, because um, I like trades, but this was like,
It
wait,
was a lot.
what?
Every possible player who could move moved, and then
Yeah,
some,
yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, some trades I was like, I didn't even know she still played. It was
Yeah.
just like, it was just this one, it was just like every single player on the move. Okay, this is it. I can't thank you enough for jumping on. I know it's crazy. Um, you as a sports writer living in Los Angeles, is this the dream for you? Was it always the dream, the sports writing?
Oh, I mean, definitely don't have enough time to get into all of that, but
Yes. Give us like the 2-minute version, and then I'm going to come back and pepper you with personal
like
questions.
like a lot of kids who went to Duke, I was pre-med, always a big sports fan. So like the thought was, okay, maybe I could be like an orthopedic surgeon, eventually a team doctor of some sort. That was the original dream. And as I labored through some pre-med classes, it became clear that that should no longer be the dream. And all of my time at Duke was spent basically in the student newspaper office, the Chronicle there, and I loved it so very much. And, there's always some battling in your head of like, is the thing that I love the most supposed to be my job? Like, not every hustle is supposed to be a job. Like, it could just be a thing that I like to do. And then eventually I just came around, you know what? This is what we're going to try. And knock on wood, I've been lucky enough to have a full-time job in this space for a good chunk of time now. And me, 34 years old, this is the dream. This is exactly where I want to be.
Sabreena Merchant, everybody. I just love how we ended the podcast, that she is living her dream being a sports writer for The Athletic. She's from LA, covering LA, but covering the entire landscape. She gets to travel around and just report and write on women's basketball. It's a dream. It's a dream. And she's living it. And it made me so happy. It brought me a lot of joy. And boy, did I love the nerdiness. I literally felt like, we had been talking, like, I'm always like looking at the clock, being like, oh God, I hope I'm not trapping this person for so long. I feel that way about all my guests, but I just wanted to keep going. I wanted to talk about TCU Baylor. I wanted to talk about exactly who are the final four, like who's the dark horse. I mean, but when you're approaching like an hour of someone's time, I'm like, okay, Foley, wrap it up. But so fun. So just a great way to start my day out talking about women's college basketball. All right, here's some exciting news. I am going to be in Austin, Texas, Thursday, March 27th, which is coming up in a couple weeks. And I am going to be helping launch 1972 Pub, the first women's sports bar in Austin, Texas. It's the first women's sports bar in Texas. It's so exciting. I'm doing a live Herlights, special guests to be announced. Hopefully by the end of the week or next week, but I'm cooking up some good ones. I'm very excited. And so I'm working with the owners, and they're having their big launch that week. And so Her Lights is 7:30 Thursday, March 27th. I'll announce the guests soon. But come on out and support this amazing women's sports bar. It's Texas, obviously, that runs super conservative. They're trying to erase just women off the planet. They're making wild accusations in the news about how women's sports, nobody watches women's sports. It's not supported. The numbers are down. I don't know why they're doing all of this. I mean, I think we know why. But it's just so not true. So having a women's sports bar open in such a conservative state with such a horrifying governor is, just a slice of joy, and what everybody should be, really supporting them and backing them, because these women are fantastic, and I'm so excited to meet them in person and do this live show. So yeah, Thursday, March 27th. I will link all the details in the show notes, or you can go on herlights.com, and the link will be in there as well. Very excited. So come on out to Austin And thanks again, as always, for supporting this podcast. We've got a lot of fun ones coming up. I've got, I want to like tell you what I've got planned, but it'll be a surprise. And yeah, we're going to keep doing twice a month for the next couple months while I work on some side sports projects, and then we might go back to weekly. But all kinds of good things coming up. And also, just a shout out, go on my YouTube page, Erin Foley Comic, and I will link that in the show notes because I'm trying to put up more and more, more timely content as well to partner with the podcast. But that is it. That is our show. Thank you all. As always, please rate and review the show. It's so important. 5 stars. Leave a fun comment. I love reading them. And it makes me feel connected to everybody. And if you want to see a guest or if any, want to email me personally, it's Erin@herlights.com. Fans, friends, family, have the best week of your life.